They fined me $750 for a fence post they said leaned 3 degrees off vertical, then ordered me to repaint it within 48 hours or face daily penalties. That was the moment I printed the clause they'd never noticed, the one that made their authority over my land expire at midnight on June 14th. Welcome to my channel. I'm Ethan Cole, a civil engineer from Denton, Texas, and this story's not fiction. It's what happens when an HOA crosses a line, and someone who reads the fine print fights back. If you're new here, I'd love to have you subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from. I'm always curious how far these HOA tales travel. The morning the notice arrived, I was sorting invoices at my drafting desk, coffee gone cold, the smell of printer toner hanging sharp in the air. My daughter's photo, cap and gown, class of 22, watched from a frame I hadn't dusted in months. Losing my wife 2 years earlier had left me with just the house and that promise. Keep her garden blooming. Keep the place we built. Our HOA, Cedar Trace, had other plans. They wanted uniform fences, beige only, and they'd recently appointed a new president, Karen Dillmore, whose mission statement might as well have been, "Control everything with grass." The first meeting I attended after the notice, she leaned across the podium and said, "Mr. Cole, rules are rules. If you can't comply, perhaps Cedar Trace isn't for you." Her tone had that perfect blend of superiority and performative concern. The board nodded, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and I felt something twist behind my ribs. Not anger yet, but a recognition. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about power. I went home, opened a binder labeled Closing Docs, and flipped to the covenants. Those crisp, embossed pages I hadn't read in 12 years. Section 7.4, Maintenance Standards. Section 8.3, Authority over Fencing. And there it was. Governing O. Authority extends only to parcels recorded under Plat B. My lot was in Plat A, annexed later under a separate agreement. Knowledge nugget number 1. In many U.S. communities, annexed parcels retain original easements and can't be governed retroactively without a supermajority vote, usually 67% of owners. That night, under the porch light, I laid out maps, survey stamps, and notarized addenda. The numbers didn't lie. I wasn't under their jurisdiction, not technically, but I knew better than to charge in waving papers. My neighbor, Paul Brennan, retired postal worker, always smelled like pipe tobacco, wandered over with 2 beers. "You're digging again," he said. "They'll come for you harder if they smell blood." "They already did," I told him, tapping the notice. "They just don't know I've got a bigger shovel." The next morning I requested all HOA records relating to fence modifications. Karen replied within hours. Per HOA policy, requests must be approved by the board. That was illegal, and she knew it. Texas Property Code, FAR 209.005 guarantees member access to records within 10 business days, so I printed the statute, highlighted it, and hand-delivered it to their drop box, snapping a time-stamped photo as proof. By day 9, a plain envelope appeared on my porch. No return address, but the smell of toner again. Inside, 26 photocopied pages, most redacted. But they missed one. A maintenance vendor invoice for perimeter lot inspections. Annexed properties. Annexed. My category. It meant they were spending our dues on work outside their legal boundary. Misappropriation, if proven. A week later I showed Paul. "They're paying for services they can't enforce," I said. He squinted. "You sure you want to poke this bear? They'll fine you into foreclosure." "I've measured the cage," I said. "It's smaller than they think." 3 days later, Karen showed up on my driveway. I with a clipboard and 2 committee members. "You've been warned," she said, her smile tight. "We're issuing a daily penalty of $75 starting tomorrow." I noted the time, 10:43 a.m., and recorded the exchange on my dashcam, one-party consent in Texas. As she walked off, I could already hear the next move forming in my mind. A certified letter, notarized, citing the covenant clause they'd forgotten. But I didn't send it yet, not until I had something better. That night, I opened the county property appraiser's site, traced parcel histories back to 1998, and saw a name repeated on multiple HOA filings. Dillmore Holdings, LLC, Karen's husband's firm. He'd sold 2 lots to the HOA at inflated rates. Paul whistled when I showed him. Conflict of interest. Exactly, I said. But I need one more link. At midnight, with my laptop's fan humming, I downloaded the deed transfer. The ink-stamped recording date, June 14, 2011. Exactly 12 years to the day from their threatened penalty start. 12 years. HOA authority on annexations lapses after 12 years without renewal. June 14, 2023, midnight. That's when the timer would hit 0. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old ranch house felt like a countdown tick toward June 14th. I'd already marked the date in red ink on my wall calendar. One circle for freedom, one for risk. Because when midnight came, either the HOA's power would vanish, or I'd find myself in a courtroom defending my own dirt. Karen's next letter arrived on June 8th, thick paper, embossed logo. Final warning, it read in bold. I could smell her perfume on the envelope, some floral kind that tried too hard to be expensive. The attached statement listed the total penalties to date, $375, plus a projected $525 for the coming week. She'd copied their legal counsel, a name I didn't recognize. I took a photo of every page, front and back, then slipped it into a new binder tab labeled Evidence, Phase 1. I'd started numbering them like project phases at work, because to me, this was constructio and management, just on a legal site instead of a building site. Paul caught me on the porch that evening. You're cataloging like a crime scene, he said. Exactly, I told him. Chain of evidence. Paper never lies. He grunted, sipping his beer. They'll double down before they break. He was right. 2 days later, I caught a wellness check visit from a patrol car. Apparently, someone reported unusual activity at my address. The officer, a young guy with a buzz cut, apologized after 5 minutes. Sir, looks like your HOA filed the request. Sorry for the inconvenience. I smiled thinly. No trouble, officer. Mind if I get a copy of your report for my records? He raised an eyebrow. Sure. You're building a file, huh? Something like that. Knowledge nugget number 2. In most states, malicious or excessive wellness checks requested under false pretenses can constitute harassment if a pattern is documented, especially when tied to property disputes. That same night, I received an anonymous text. Give up the fight, Cole. The board always wins. Unknown number. I printed it anyway. Evidence, Phase 2. By June 11th, I'd mapped every HOA expenditure for the last 2 years, thanks to public financial disclosures. The vendor checks didn't just go to Dillmore Holdings. They went to a company called Greenline Consulting, registered under a P.O. box. Quick Secretary of State search. Manager listed as K. Dillmore, Karen herself. She'd been billing the HOA for landscape advisory services. I drafted an email to the Texas Real Estate Commission Ethics Division but didn't send it yet. Timing was everything. That evening, as cicadas screamed in the trees, Paul leaned on my porch rail. You ever think about selling? Can't, I said. This was her place, my wife's. She planted every lilac out back. If they want to bulldoze it into conformity, they'll have to drag me out first. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of my fence with a tape measure and camera. Every slat, every post documented. My dog, Jasper, trotted beside me, tail wagging. When I reached the northwest corner, I noticed something new. A small orange flag planted near the boundary, marked Survey, Cedar Trace HOA. They were prepping for forced maintenance, without consent. Trespass, if proven. I crouched, took a time-stamped photo, and whispered, "Gotcha." Later that day, Karen herself came by, clipboard in hand, smile like a blade. We're scheduling professional corrections to your fence alignment. Cost will be assessed to your account. Funny, I said, since that fence isn't under your jurisdiction. She tilted her head. You'll find that interpretation unsupported. Then maybe the county clerk will support it, I replied, holding up a folder of printed plats. See, your HOA charter's authority ends at Plat B. I'm in A. Recorded June 14, 2011. Her face froze just long enough for me to see the fear flicker. Then the smile snapped back. Our attorney will review. Do that, I said, but check your renewal clause first. She turned on her heel and left. The air smelled like ozone before a storm. That night, I finally sent the email to the state ethics office, attaching the parcel maps, the conflict of interest links, and the inspection photos. I also scheduled a delivery of one certified envelope, sealed leverage, to the HOA's registered address. Delivery date, June 14th, 10 a.m., the calm before the showdown. By the time the clock hit midnight on June 13th, I was sitting on my porch, Jasper asleep at my feet, watching the sky turn heavy with humidity. The sound of distant thunder mixed with the rustle of papers in the binder on my lap. "Almost time," I muttered. Paul's porch light flicked on across the street. He raised his beer like a signal. "Ready?" he called. "Always," I said, and when the church bell downtown tolled 12, I closed the binder with a snap. The clause had officially expired. My property was mine again. But the storm wasn't over. It was just starting. If you've ever fought an HOA and won, or lost, I want to hear your story. Are you firmly anti-HOA, or do you think they keep order? Drop your thoughts below. Let's see where America stands. And if you've faced one of these battles, share one tactic that helped you push back. The next morning, Karen called an emergency board meeting. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for June 14th, 9 a.m., just 1 hour before my certified letter was due to land in their mailbox. I knew Karen's rhythm by now. She loved grand gestures wrapped in official procedure. I arrived 10 minutes early at the clubhouse, binder under my arm, tie just tight enough to look serious but not desperate. The air inside was heavy with that recycled HVAC chill that smells like dry carpet and powdered creamer. The fluorescent tubes flickered once, like they knew something was about to short out. Karen sat at the head of the table, gavel beside her coffee cup. "Mr. Cole," she said without looking up, "this is a closed session." "I'm on the agenda," I said. "Section 4B, homeowner appeal." Her lips twitched. "Then speak quickly." I laid 3 documents on the table, my deed, the annexation map, and a notarized statement from the county clerk confirming the HOA's jurisdiction lapse on Plat A. The papers made a sound like gunfire against the laminate. "This fence," I said, "and this property ceased to fall under Cedar Trace authority as of midnight. Any continued enforcement constitutes trespass." Karen's attorney, a young man in a navy suit that still had thread tucks at the cuffs, leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, that interpretation isn't interpretation," I cut in. "It's record." Paul, sitting quietly in the back, gave a small nod. Karen glanced at the attorney, then back at me. "Regardless, the board has authority over aesthetics for community harmony. It's in the spirit of the covenants." "Spirit doesn't override recording dates," I said. The room buzzed with whispered commentary. She raised the gavel. "Enough. We'll confer privately." As I turned to leave, she hissed, low enough for only me to hear, "You're going to regret this, Mr. Cole." Outside, the sunlight hit like a furnace. I leaned against my truck and exhaled, heart hammering. For a second, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if they'd retaliate harder. Then my phone buzzed. Delivery confirmed, 10:03 a.m. The certified letter had landed. Inside it were the deeds, the conflict of interest evidence, and a single sentence. "Effective immediately. You are operating beyond statutory authority per Texas Property Code 209.006. I didn't need to say more. I just had to wait. At noon, Paul texted a single line. "They're in panic mode." By dusk, word spread through the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone leaked the documents, screenshots, parcel maps, even Karen's company filings. Comments multiplied faster than she could delete them. That night, I walked Jasper around the block. Porch lights flicked on one by one, and neighbors I'd never met before nodded or whispered thanks. One woman handed me a folded note that said, "Finally, someone stood up." But I knew it wasn't over. HOA boards don't surrender. They regroup. The next day, 3 new violation notices appeared taped to my door: mailbox height, unapproved solar lights, and improper storage of lawn equipment, my wheelbarrow. Each fine, $150. It felt almost comical. But harassment only works if you react emotionally. I logged every violation in my spreadsheet with photos, timestamps, and statute citations. Then I started my own timer. Knowledge nugget number 3. In Texas, cumulative HO. Fines exceeding $200 for the same category within 30 days trigger mandatory pre-hearing rights, and any errors in notice or timing void the penalties entirely. I knew they'd slip up. They always do. Paul came by with his thermos of coffee, wheezing laughter. "You're turning your house into a legal lab," he said. "Every experiment needs a control group," I replied. He squinted toward the clubhouse. "They're planning something. I heard they called the county inspector." "Good," I said. "Let them call everyone. The more witnesses, the cleaner the record." Late that evening, thunder rolled again. I sat at my desk, binder open, drafting my next step, a formal demand for accounting transparency, citing fiduciary breach. I'd give them 72 hours. Then I'd go public. The cursor blinked at the end of the last line. Failure to respond will result in escalation to state oversight. My finger hovered before pressing print. I could already smell the ink warming in the machine. Before I hit the power button, I thought of my daughter again, her last text from college. "Keep the place beautiful, Dad. Mom would like that." I smiled. "I'm trying, kiddo. One clause at a time." The printed letter slid from the tray with a hiss, still hot, and I dropped it into the next binder slot. Evidence, Phase 3. Now it was just a waiting game. Before we move forward, I'm curious. How far should an HOA's power go? Should they dictate your fence, your lights, your garden? Tell me your line in the comments, or at least like the video if you think homeowners deserve a say. By the weekend, I had a voicemail from the county inspector himself. The voicemail came through at 7:42 a.m., the metallic rasp of a man who'd been dealing with bureaucrats for too long. "Mr. Cole, this is Inspector Ramirez with Denton County Building Compliance. We received a report from Cedar Trace HOA Abutis. He alleged structural issues on your fence. I'd like to schedule an inspection tomorrow morning, if that's all right with you." I could almost hear Karen behind that call, pushing buttons she didn't realize I'd already wired with trip alarms. "Tomorrow's fine," I told the machine, then texted back to confirm and added one line. "Please bring your jurisdictional map." When he arrived the next morning, the sun had barely cleared the pines. Ramirez stepped out of his truck, tan clipboard, mirrored sunglasses, a coffee the size of his hand. He wasn't one for small talk. "I'll be quick," he said, clicking his pen. "These HOA folks file a lot of complaints." "Do they file maps too?" I asked. He flipped through his folder. "Nope, they just sent photos of a leaning post." I pointed at the boundary marker. "Before you measure, check your county overlay. You'll see this parcel listed under pre-annexation code." He studied the screen of his tablet, then let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. You're outside their jurisdiction entirely." He snapped a few photos, then gave a thin smile. "I'll file this as no violation out of HOA authority. Should be public record by Friday." That sound, the ballpoint scratching the form, was better than any gavel. When the report posted 2 days later, it set off the first internal tremor. HOA funds had been used to pursue enforcement outside their boundary. Their insurer wouldn't like that. By Monday, Karen had sent a neighborhood email blaming clerical confusion and announcing a new special assessment to cover legal expenses incurred by frivolous claims. $85 per homeowner, due immediately. I could feel the neighborhood mood shift. People started whispering at mailboxes, forwarding the county report like contraband. That evening, Paul dropped by, hat low, voice rough. "They're losing control, Ethan. You can almost hear the cracks." "Good," I said, flipping to a fresh page in the binder labeled Phase 4, Fiscal Misconduct. I'd been waiting for this moment. The plan wasn't revenge. It was precision correction. Knowledge nugget number 4. When an HOA assesses funds for legal defense, those funds can only be used for actions within lawful authority. Misuse becomes insurance fraud if knowingly continued after notice. So I drafted one more document, an anonymous letter to the HOA's insurer with copies of Ramirez's report and the conflict of interest filings. I mailed it from a post office 2 towns over. 3 days later, I heard the first domino fall. A board treasurer resigned for personal reasons. By that weekend, their attorney withdrew representation. Karen, however, didn't blink. She sent me a certified letter of her own, 6 pages, accusing me of defamation, interference, and incitement. I laughed when I read it. Half the claims were cut and paste from a template, but I noticed something small. She'd signed it as acting president. Acting. That meant her term renewal hadn't been certified. That was the hole I needed. Under HOA bylaws, leadership terms required annual ratification through community vote. But the minutes from the last meeting, posted online, had no quorum noted. I downloaded them immediately, highlighted the absence, and cross-checked attendance logs. She hadn't been legally reinstalled. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, the kind that tastes like burnt rubber, and whispered, "Reversal 1, locked." For the next few days, I stayed silent. Let her push. Let her think she'd cornered me. Paul didn't like the quiet. "They're coming apart, but you're too calm," he said one evening. "That's how you win," I told him, "when they think they're winning." Karen called for an open forum meeting on June 28th, claiming it was time to restore unity. I knew what that meant, a stage for her to reassert power, humiliate me publicly, and frame my evidence as rumor. Perfect. I'd already requested a bogus, an official copy of Ramirez's report and notarized affidavit verifying non-jurisdiction. It arrived 2 days before the meeting, stamped and sealed. That same night, the smell of rain drifted in through my screen door as I slid the document into a clear folder. The embossed seal caught the porch light, gleaming like a medal. Visual beat number 1. Paul watched from the steps. "That your bullet?" "Not a bullet," I said. "More like a mirror." The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept hearing the creak of the floorboards and the tap of rain against the tin awning. When dawn came, it felt like the calm before a trial. I ironed my shirt, fed Jasper, packed my binder. The final entry sat in the front pocket, a notarized motion to dissolve invalid board authority, effective immediately upon verification by a neutral witness. The neutral witness? Officer Ramirez. The meeting started at 6:00 p.m. sharp. The clubhouse was already standing room only when I arrived. 50, maybe 60 neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder under the humming ceiling fans. The air smelled like folding chairs, rain-soaked denim, and tension. Karen sat at the head of the table, her gavel polished enough to blind someone under the fluorescence. I took a seat near the front. Ramirez stood by the back wall, uniform pressed, clipboard tucked under one arm. He gave me a subtle nod. Karen started with her usual preamble, soft voice, big words, no warmth. This meeting concerns the continued non-compliance of one homeowner whose defiance has undermined community harmony. She didn't have to say my name. Every head turned toward me anyway. She tapped the gavel once. "Mr. Cole, do you have anything to say before we vote to authorize legal proceedings?" I stood. "Yes," I said evenly. "I'd like to submit evidence of jurisdictional lapse and leadership invalidity." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's jaw tensed. "You are out of order." "Actually," Ramirez said, stepping forward, "he's not." His voice cut through the noise like gravel, scraping steel. Under county compliance, any property cited must be within an enforceable HOA boundary. Mr. Cole's parcel is not. He opened his folder and laid the stamped report on the table. The seal gleamed under the lights. The room went silent except for the hum of the fans. Karen blinked hard, her polished composure fracturing. This must be a misunderstanding," she stammered. Ramirez shook his head. "No misunderstanding, ma'am. The HOA's enforcement area ends at Parcel 24B. Mr. Cole's is 24A. My department has closed all active complaints as non-jurisdictional. That was reversal number 1 in motion, secret leverage going public." Karen tried to recover. "Even if that's true, my board—" "Your board," I interrupted, "hasn't been properly seated since last year. No quorum, no certification." I slid the printed meeting minutes onto the table. Page 3, line 8. No attendance record, which makes your position ceremonial. Someone in the back snorted. Someone else whispered, "Holy hell." Karen reached for the gavel, but Ramirez's voice froze her mid-motion. "Ma'am, if your authority's expired, I'll have to note that any ongoing enforcement attempts could be considered unlawful." Her hand dropped. Then came the sound I'll never forget. The slow murmur of neighbors realizing the emperor had no robes. Phones lifted, photos snapped, the truth digitized and unstoppable. Karen's attorney stood, adjusting his tie. "Madam President, Acting President," he corrected himself, "I strongly advise adjournment until this can be reviewed." She looked at him like he'd betrayed her. "Sit down." He didn't. He walked out. I turned toward the crowd. This isn't about one fence. It's about accountability. We all deserve fair, transparent governance. not fines invented for revenue or control. A man near the door raised his hand. "You mean we can challenge this stuff?" "Absolutely," I said. "You can request records, demand audits, vote for term limits. The law's not your enemy. It's your shield." That earned a few claps, then a swell of applause. Even Paul, who hated crowds, was smiling from the back. Karen slammed the gavel. "Enough! This meeting is over!" But her voice cracked. The sound didn't carry authority anymore. It carried panic. I gathered my binder, nodding to Ramirez. "Thank you for your time, officer." He smiled faintly. "Just doing my job, sir. But I'll be filing a supplemental report. Seems like this board's been stretching its reach." Outside, the rain had stopped. The parking lot glistened under the orange glow of sodium lights. I could still hear murmurs inside, neighbors forming small circles, talking fast, connecting dots. Paul caught up as I reached my truck. "You didn't just win, Ethan," he said. "You started something." "Let's hope it stays clean," I said. "The next move's theirs." It didn't take long. The following week I received a new kind of letter, not a threat this time, but a smear. Anonymous flyers appeared in mailboxes claiming I'd doctored documents, that I was under investigation. My business website got spammed with fake reviews. Someone even filed a noise complaint about Jasper barking. That was the retaliation montage. Their desperation smelled like printer ink and fear. But I logged it all. Each notice, each timestamp. I built a grid. Columns for sender, date, false claim, corresponding proof. By the end of the week, the spreadsheet had 27 entries. I wasn't angry anymore. I was surgical. Still, one night, when I caught headlights slowing outside the house, I felt that flicker of fear, for my daughter, for the home my wife had loved. I stood at the window, hand on the phone, ready if it crossed the line. It didn't. The car moved on, but the chill stayed. That moment reminded me why I'd started. Not revenge, but protection. By dawn, I had a plan. I'd turn their smear into exposure. If they wanted noise, I'd give them a public frequency they couldn't control. Tell me this. $250, $500, $1,000 fines. Are they justice or just a revenue stream in disguise? What's your breaking point before you push back? Drop it below. I'm curious who's had enough. The HOA had gone too far, and they'd triggered something they couldn't undo. Because the next call I made wasn't to a lawyer, it was to a local reporter. The reporter's name was Dana McNeil, mid-30s, steady eyes, voice like late-night radio. She ran a small column in the Denton Chronicle called Small Town Power Plays. I'd read her expose on a developer who forged storm drain permits, so I knew she liked documents more than drama. I met her 2 days later at a diner off Highway 380. The place smelled of fryer oil and burnt coffee, and the window glass still shimmered with last night's storm. I spread my binder across the formica, pages like topographic lines of a long battle. "Everything's time-stamped, certified, or publicly recorded," I said. "No speculation, just paper." She flipped through silently, tapping her pen against a photo of Ramirez's inspection report. "And you're willing to go on record?" "Under my own name," I said. "Truth doesn't need disguise." She smiled faintly. "Most folks don't risk retaliation. Retaliation's already here." For 2 hours, we built the ark. Overreach, conflict of interest, misuse of dues, and expired authority. She asked for one quote she could print without editing. I said, "A homeowners association should guard the neighborhood, not rule it." When I drove home, I felt something shift, the kind of calm that comes when fear turns into function. 3 days later, the article dropped online at 7:05 a.m. By 9 o'clock, it had 3,000 shares, and by noon the HOA's inbox crashed. The headline read, "HOA President accused of overreach and conflict, county confirms jurisdiction lapse." Karen called it libel. Her statement to the paper sounded rehearsed. Cedar Trace HOA operates with integrity and accountability. But the insurer didn't buy it. That afternoon she received notice of policy review, code for their pulling coverage. That was the first domino. By June 30th, half the board resigned. The HOA's website went offline for maintenance. Rumors spread that state auditors were reviewing expenditures. But I stayed quiet. waiting for the right moment to use my final card, the one I'd prepared weeks ago when I bought a tiny forgotten parcel along the HOA's access road. A 12 by 60-foot strip of gravel that every maintenance truck crossed daily. I'd purchased it through a tax lien sale for 83,000 don'ts. It gave me legal control of their main service easement. Reversal number 1 complete. Paul nearly choked on his coffee when I told him, "You own their road?" "Technically, yes," I said. "They can still cross it if they remain in good standing with me." He laughed until he wheezed. "You mad genius." But it wasn't about payback. I'd hold it quietly, use it later as leverage for something lasting. The HOA tried one last desperate stunt, a special emergency meeting to reinstate Karen's authority. They posted flyers promising to restore order and silence misinformation. I attended, binder under my arm, same seat near the front. This time the crowd was double. No one clapped when Karen spoke. Halfway through, Ramirez entered again, uninvited but welcome. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing. The smell of rain followed him in. It was always raining during these things. Karen tried to shout over the murmurs. "This meeting will reaffirm our leadership structure." But a neighbor interrupted, waving a copy of the Chronicle. "Reaffirm? You haven't been legal for a year." The room erupted. Karen pounded the gavel, but the noise swallowed her. I stood, waited for silence, and spoke evenly. "I have a proposal." Every eye turned. "End this quietly," I said. "Step down voluntarily. In exchange, I'll waive use fees for the access parcel and help draft a reform charter. Real transparency, fair elections, open audits." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You think you can dictate terms?" "I think I can offer peace," I said. She hesitated, looking around the room at faces she no longer controlled. Ramirez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you decline, the county can open a formal inquiry. Might be cleaner to consider his offer." That was visual beat number 2, the officer standing under flickering light, rain dripping from his jacket, validating everything with one simple nod. The gavel didn't drop this time. It rolled off the table, landed on the floor, and stayed there. Karen left without a word. By nightfall, she'd emailed her resignation to all members. Outside, thunder cracked again, but this time, it sounded like release. Paul walked beside me through the damp parking lot. "So what's next?" "Rebuilding," I said, "and reform." He nodded, pulling his hat low. "You earned it." Before I left, I looked back at the clubhouse, its lights flickering through the mist like a tired old ship finally dropping anchor. For everyone watching, when you catch someone abusing power, what's the right response? Buy leverage and negotiate, or drag them straight to court? Tell me what you'd do. I want to see how people think when the rules get twisted. The cleanup was about to begin. For a week, Cedar Trace sat in a strange silence. No emails, no citations, no meetings. The usual patrol car that used to idle by my mailbox vanished. Neighbors began cutting their lawns without fear of tape measure inspections. It was like the whole neighborhood had exhaled. Then, on July 7th, a plain white envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, just a statement. Special audit scheduled. HOA financials under independent review. That was the final confirmation that the dominoes had fallen exactly as planned. When insurers and auditors start sniffing around, the rest collapses on its own. By midweek, the Denton Chronicle followed up with another article quoting Ramirez. County review finds HOA jurisdictional irregularities. New oversight process under discussion. The tone had shifted from scandal to reform, from gossip to governance. Still, I wasn't celebrating yet. I had one last reversal to engineer, turning my private leverage into public structure. At a small cafe downtown, I met with 3 neighbors who had stepped up as interim board members. Grace, a retired teacher with a calm voice. Malik, an accountant who'd been fined for having a basketball hoop. And Andrea, a nurse who'd fought off a bogus landscaping violation while working night shifts during the pandemic. Real people, not power chasers. "I'll hand over the easement parcel," I told them, "if we do this right." Grace adjusted her glasses. "Meaning?" "Meaning a reform deal," I said, sliding a draft document across the table. Term limits, transparent voting, open records, an independent ethics committee, and a rollback of any fines issued outside proper jurisdiction. Put it in writing, file it with the county, and I'll deed the road back for $1. Malik read it twice, nodding slowly. That's clean. Fair. Andrea smiled faintly. Feels like justice, not revenge. Exactly, I said. Let's build something better than the mess we inherited. We signed the agreement that night in blue ink, the kind that stains your fingers if you press too hard. I kept a copy, notarized, sealed, and dated July 10th, 2023. 2 days later, the new charter went live on the community site. Cedar Trace Community Association, transparent, accountable, neighbor first. Reversal number 2 complete. The next HOA meeting looked nothing like the old ones. The gavel was gone, replaced by a simple bell. Ramirez sat quietly near the back, off-duty but smiling. Paul even showed up, wearing a clean shirt and joking. Figured I'd see if democracy really works. During the open floor, a teenager raised his hand, something I'd never seen before. Can we start a community garden on the empty lot? Grace looked at me, then at the crowd. We can vote right now. Unanimous. Yes, the applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. Afterward, I walked outside, the evening thick with that sweet smell of wet grass and barbecue smoke. For the first time in months, no one was arguing about paint shades or mailbox heights. Just neighbors, laughing. Paul joined me near the flagpole. You did it, he said. Took down an empire with a binder. I laughed. Nah. Just reminded folks it was their neighborhood all along. He nodded. Still, you're the reason it's different now. I didn't answer right away. The porch lights glowed against the dusk, catching the silver corners of my binder where I'd left it open, pages curling from humidity, ink fading but readable. That's when Dana called. Got a follow-up for you, she said. State Ombudsman just confirmed Cedar Trace is part of a pilot reform program. They're using your case as an example of best practices. I leaned against the truck and smiled. Guess it's official then. She laughed. You'll like tomorrow's headline. By the time I hung up, the night was full of crickets and distant thunder, not threats. Tell me this. When an HOA crosses the line, should punishment match the damage, or should reform always take priority? What precedent do you think sets communities right? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew what came next would matter just as much as the fight. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside, 2 county vehicles parked by the cloddy. House and Ramirez, standing beside a woman in a navy blazer with a clipboard. She introduced herself as Ms. Hunt, Regional Compliance Auditor. Her tone was neutral, clipped, precise. We're closing the file, Mr. Cole, she said. No violations, no further action required. The HOA's new charter satisfies all reform criteria. I nodded. That's good to hear. She smiled faintly. You know, we don't often see cases end without litigation. You did this clean. That word, clean, hit me harder than any victory could. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel angry, just lighter. A few days later, the Denton Chronicle printed the headline, Dana had promised. From fence feud to reform, how one homeowner redefined accountability. The article wasn't about scandal anymore, it was about restoration. She even included a quote from Ramirez. Sometimes, the best enforcement is transparency. The story rippled beyond our little subdivision. Local news picked it up, then a homeowners' rights forum online. My inbox filled with messages, veterans, teachers, parents, each with their own battle scars from overreaching boards. They thanked me, asked for copies of the Reform Charter, shared their stories. That night, as I walked Jasper down the newly quiet streets, I noticed something I hadn't before. People sitting on porches again. Laughter carried through open windows. Someone strummed a guitar. The HOA office light was still on, but inside I saw Malik and Grace sorting receipts with coffee cups beside them. No suits, no tension. Paul waved from across the road. Garden starts next weekend, he called. You're bringing the tiller, right? Wouldn't miss it, I said. We'd turned conflict into community. That was the real win. Before heading in, I stopped by my fence, the same post that started it all. Still 3 degrees off vertical, still defiant, still standing. I ran my hand along the grain, felt the rough wood catch my palm, and laughed quietly. Guess imperfection held its ground. I went inside, made fresh coffee, and opened a new binder. Blank tabs, clean poise, ipper. On the spine I wrote one line in pen. Cedar Trace Reform 2023, case closed. Then, just before midnight, I posted one final update on the channel. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories like this reach you first. As responsible citizens, we share these not for outrage, but for guidance, because sometimes fixing the system is the best revenge. The next morning, the video hit 1 million views. And for those wondering what changed after, Karen took a compliance course, later joined a community mediation program. Cedar Trace reduced its dues by 15%, opened public financial records, and held its first Neighbors' Day barbecue on August 20th. I showed up with Paul, shared ribs with Malik, and watched kids chase Jasper through the open lot where the garden now grew. A local news crew filmed a short segment. Ramirez smiling awkwardly in front of the camera, Grace holding the new charter. They asked if I'd do an interview about citizen oversight. I declined. I'd said everything I needed to. As the sun dipped low, lighting the lilacs my wife had planted years ago, I whispered, "We kept it beautiful, just like you wanted." And for the first time in a long while, it truly was. End of story.